So this is, hi, James McKernan, welcome back to my shop, the Scenery Farm. So this is a newer version of this jig. It will eventually have the vacuum rest on it, and I've had a lot of requests for a drawing on the measurements, the dimensions for this. One of the reasons I didn't have a drawing was I built it bit by bit. And the other thing, I was somewhat concerned about providing a drawing because I was worried that the model would change and then the drawing wouldn't work anymore. And this is a new version of this. I'm just going to build a box for it, and I can see that it's quite different. It's got a different dimension. I mean, it's obviously, this is the 18-inch model and this is the 24-inch model, but the parts are upgraded on here and it's slightly different. So instead of providing drawings, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the process of how I built it and the dimensions I took from it, and how I did each part. And from that, I think that most builders are going to be able to then build their own. So I'm just going to do what I did on this one. I'm going to start bit by bit, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the plate that's here. And it doesn't even matter how big this one is. Essentially, I've gone like 1.5 inches over, which the reason I went 1.5 inches over is so it's wider than the little knob here. And I can do the exact same thing on this one. So if I went 1.5 inches over here, all I'm going to do is measure, and it's around 29 inches. So 1.5 inches times 2 is 3. So that's 32 inches. So I'm going to get a 32-inch wide bottom plate. And I'm going to make it the same depth as here. And so this is 6.5 inches on this unit. So that's 32 by 6.5. And then I'm going to move forward. An important note is this piece here is an 18 mil thick piece of plywood. And I'm in Canada, and much of our wood is either going to be 18 mil, 19 mil, or 3/4. And when you just have to know which it is when you use it. So this is 18 mil because this bottom piece is 3/4. What I wanted to do is have this bottom shelf, when I put it in, I wanted to have enough tolerance for it to slide in here so that it holds nicely, but it doesn't have too much friction. So a 1 mil gap between the top of this plate and the underside of this ledge, it's all you need. But I could even change the design so it doesn't matter if I use the same or different size wood. Doesn't, as long as there's a gap there. So 32 by 6. Chop saw. So this is an 1/8 inch roundover bit. I just want to take the edge off it. If I don't, then this will chip away, and also, well, it's just not as nice on the hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up so it's flush with the outside edge here. Measure what's left over. It's 2 7/32, 2 1/4 inch. So then I'm going to mark 1 1/8 on both sides. All I've done is marked the place where they have bolts that can go in there, but what I want it to do is be flush, and a number 8 screw, a number 8 self-tapper or pan head screw will hold that in there quite well. So I just have some 3/4 inch number 8 screws, and I could put it on there and just put the screws in, but I don't want to do that. This is a pre-drill and countersink, and I'm not going to use the countersink function. I'm just going to pre-drill it so I know exactly where the screws are going to go. And I'm going just on a slight angle because I know the drill won't be able to go straight up and down unless I use a long bit, which I could, but I didn't. So the other part of this that I'm going to prep right now is I have this one here. When it goes in place, I have it set up so I can put stove bolt, a 1/4 stove bolt right in here. So I'm going to prep that as well. I'm just going to make sure I can do that and not hit things. So I'm putting this back on, and I was able to get fairly center on this because the knob's a little further forward on that one. This one, the knob is centered here, so I'm going to go a little further forward, but I want it to be consistent. And the measurement doesn't matter terribly much, but I wanted to make it the same on both sides. And it actually works out well. The width of this adjustable square is a good guide. Got to go this way. So I've gone just two sizes above. So this is, what is that, 9/32? It's a little worn off. It'll move around a bit, so I'm going to I'm going to start the hole with a smaller bit. And as much as this bench regularly ends up with holes in it, I try to avoid it when I have the presence of mind to avoid it. And if you drill through into another piece of wood, there's less tear out on the back side. And I want to have these stove bolts flush so they're not going to be in the way when I eventually install that. So this work's done. I can mount this. I actually prefer to have a 6-inch bit instead of using this adapter, but I don't know where my 6-inch bits are. So the adapter works. That's why I don't like using the adapter. So the first part of this is done. It's mounted on the plate. The next part of this, is to build the major part of this box. So, oh, there it is. There's where the long dude goes. And I can't even remember what that's for. Let's see, you don't have a, let's see a corresponding hole in yours. Mine's better. It's probably somewhere there. I just don't know where it is. So let's sketch this out. If this unit here, and I can make these pieces kind of whatever size we need, but this is the maximum width of the unit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add an inch and maybe 1.25 inches on either side. So if this is 32 inches wide, that means that the interior of the box is going to be 34.5 inches wide. And this box, the height I had here was 9.5 inches. So that gives an extra 0.5 inches for height here. So what'll happen is if I had 9.5 inches, this is 7.25. So I had 2.25 inch extra space. And as you bring this up, let's say you do a big one, you don't have to keep bringing this down. So if I use the same math and I just go, okay, this is here, I'm going to have 2.25 extra here. So your box is much different than mine. So this is 9 inches, so it's going to be 11.25 inch interior height. I don't actually much care whether I build in metric or imperial. I'm kind of bilingual when it comes to that math. I'm just building at a 3/4 inch plywood, and it's a true 3/4, so I'm just going to do everything in imperial. 19 mil. Ish. So that's that. The depth on this is 11¼ inches, but it's, let's see, it's 5 inches from the front of here. So 5 inches from the front of there, so it's already bigger. So it's a foot. So this is, so 5 inches from the front here. The overall dimension here is around 11½ inches, where this one here is 11. So there's a ½ inch discrepancy. So I'm gonna, one of the things we spoke about, the person I'm building this for, is adding extra, because the dust collect shroud isn't here. So I'm gonna make it so it can be adjusted, and I'll put a stop in for here. Right now, my box is built that the front end of this hits the front end of the box, but I'm gonna build this box a little bigger so it has a stop here. So I have an interior depth of 11¾ and this is 11 on the nose. So I had 3/4 of an inch coming in, and this piece here is 3/4 of an inch deep, and it just settled right up against the back here. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna make it 13 interior dimension.
Just in case the dust collectors
A little bit bigger, yeah. So, and that's like a full inch extra based on this design. Okay, so I think that should be, I think that should be sufficient. If 13 inches here. So if I have an interior of 13 inches to there, but then I also have to add 3/4 of an inch here. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw a section of the interior of the box, and I'm gonna figure out my dimensions. So there is a 13 inches from the inside of the front there to the back here, plus 3/4. So this is going to be 13 3/4. I'm a silly boy. 13 3/4. Some days I can walk and chew bubblegum, and some days I can't. The height on this is different. It's appreciably different. So what I have here I have a good 2 inches clear from the underside of this piece to the top of the unit, and this is a different height. So 5 1/4 inches, so 7 1/4 inches clear. And then depth-wise, the way this one's designed is so that the plate I made, 5 1/2 inches, 5 1/2 inches, so the plate goes to here. So I know that the outside dimension here is 6 1/2 inches, because the plate on this one's 6 1/2 inches. So I know. The other thing I know is that this is mine. Yeah, this is mine. Why am I going nuts? I'm going nuts because I'm putting it in backwards. So I have set this up so that the top of this jig is 3/4 of an inch above this face because it's going to match up with this. But if I figure out this height from the top of this to the top of this plate, and I ignore this and I ignore this plate, that's going to be the rise right here. And it's these machined points here that I'm matching, right? So it's 3.5 inches. Bang on. See if this holds true here. Yeah. Yep, it's bang on a piece of 2x4. And then depth-wise, I have just 8.5 inches here, and that 8.5 inches will probably be decided. So the depth of this will be decided because I know this interior dimension. I know this is going to be a piece of 3/4 plywood there. And so what's remaining there is what I have to care about, except for then there's this piece here. And I have this inset here 1.5 inches. And the overall height of the thing doesn't really matter a hell of a lot to me as long as I get the interior dimensions right. Cool. So I'm going to take a small break and I'm going to stick this in a CAD program because I have a template to work on. So you actually guys might get a drawing for this unit. So this is a drawing of the box itself. What I started working with here is the interior dimension, because the outside of the box there's only one measurement that really matters, and that is going 3.5 inches from the top of this shelf where the unit sits to the top of this shelf. So it's so that the actual jig, the top of the jig, it will be right across from the back of the jig right on there. So it's the right height to support the work. And if you've seen how the jig it works, that'll make sense to you. What I've done here is, it's not a complete drawing. This is just the drawing I did to help figure out how to build the box. And this is looking inside the box. Obviously, there'll be a line across here where this point is, but I just wanted to know the dimensions so I could create my cut list. And so the height of this, 10 3/4, I figured out the height above the jig, 3 feet from side to side, there to there. 7.25 inches is the height I came up with from the underside of this lower section to the deck here. This is 6.5 inches, so it's 7.25 inches from the front all the way to the back, so it's 6.5 inches, the same size as the plate, from this point here to this point here. This is 9.5 inches, and that's just a result of this dimension, which is 9.5 inches, sorry, 8 3/4 inches from that point to that point there. And the side piece, which when you see it go together, these are the dimensions of the side piece. And it is 10 3/4 inches tall. It's 8 3/4 inches to this point here, 7.25 inches from there to there, 3.5 inches from there to there, and 7.25 inches there, and 1'4" is the length. And I had the grain going sideways on this piece, and all the other pieces, because they go side to side, I have them the grains going in this direction, including this front piece here. Yeah, so this is just a quickie sketch I threw together, and then my cut list, which I ended up doing, was this top plate here, this piece here, goes the full width of it, so it is 9.5 inches by 36 inches or 3 feet. This piece here is 7.25 inches. This one here is 7.25 inches by 36 inches. This piece here is 2 3/4 inches by 36 inches. This interior front piece is 7 1/4 by 34.5 inches because it sits inside the sides. And then the back pieces, it's 1 foot 1/4 of an inch by 36 inches is that piece. And then because there's two plates, it is 10 3/4 inches in height. Oh, it's right there, big dum-dum, by 34.5 inches. And that's it. And I made that just a hair smaller than those two dimensions, so it just snooked right in there. I also eventually, there you go. I did a bevel like that on this piece so that it would slide in more nicely. And then what I started with this one here is a piece that's 10 3/4 by 1 foot 4, and then I cut this corner out. So those are all the pieces, and then you'll see I'll build the interior pieces, and I'll just do those bit by bit as I put it together.